Good morning, Giants fans, and welcome back to another episode of Just Giants with Grump and the Cranky Fan, the best damn podcast for the best damn football team. I'm your host, the Football Grump, and with me is Mike, the Cranky Fan. What's going on, Cranky?
Oh, Grump, how is your vocal cords? You were talking last night for 37 straight hours on the Talking Giants show. I jumped into the chat a little bit. Last night was my anniversary, so we had a wonderful dinner in the city. Of course, with both of our phones, on the table, following the draft very closely. But hey, listen, Merry cool. That's all I have to tell all you kids out there. So if you're in an anniversary and the draft is going on, you can, follow along with the draft. But um,
I'm glad you had a great dinner. I had no dinner. I went there to eat pizza, and I had a slice, and then I think the cleaning lady threw out the rest of the pizza.
I heard that's when I jumped onto the chat that the pizza was gone.
I had a slice of pizza yesterday at I guess it was like maybe 7 o'clock, and then I had a sandwich at 1 a.m. when I got home.
I recommended in the chat that you guys should call that place up from Mobile that you ordered the pizza from. Maybe they deliver it for you.
Well, Snacks is supposed to be there tonight, so maybe.
Yeah, well, actually, Snacks and I were texting. We were going to go down to the station and either streak across the street or just beat the hell out of all three of you guys. But we decided not to do anything. But
No, it's probably smart because I don't know who is going to beat up Bobby. So, all right. So people have heard plenty about what I have to say, and I'm going to chime in a little bit here. But you haven't really gotten a chance to talk about this day one. So first things first, the Giants were able to select Kayvon Thibodeaux at 5. They get the second best edge rusher in the entire class, somebody that was mocked as the number 1 overall player for like the entire college season. They get him at 5, and they finally complement Azeez Ojulari on the other side. They finally have this alpha number 1 edge rusher and a very quality number 2 edge rusher. How did you feel about the pick?
well, again, I think this kind of goes back to our last show and what we talked about Kayvon Thibodeaux, even going back to if this draft would have been back in January or February, he might have been the number 1 pick in the draft. And how we felt that just so much time goes on and narratives have to be written and rewritten about guys. And he became the one where is his brand more important than him as a player? And it, probably negatively affected him. It definitely changed people's perspectives about him. And then, you had mentioned that guy who had said, "Oh, I have inside word that he's off the board." And I was like, that's ridiculous. Nobody should be off anybody's board unless they, killed somebody. I mean, Laredell Tunsil dropped on a board because he was smoking. The video of him came out smoking weed, but that doesn't mean he wasn't on anybody's board.
Yeah, I agree.
So
But
it
also,
just,
that was a draft day kind of panic thing. So I don't think he was off anybody's board mainly because nobody knew about it until the day started.
yeah. But I mean,
And
it's
not
just
even the
like,
day. That was like an hour and a half before the draft.
but that's unknown questions to me is a bigger concern than what Thibodeaux is. Whereas again, it just became perception and a narrative that just kind of snowballed out of control a little bit. I think that the Giants front office, Joe Shane and Dable and all those guys did a masterful job of keeping what they really wanted to do close to the vest. I think they used some media members that, think that they're insiders to kind of leak stuff that they wanted out there to sway perception. And it was not the way they were looking to go at all. I mean, the whole thing about Cross they were trying to get that didn't happen. Although that's kind of what the smoke signals were. The Thibodeaux thing, I think, was a smoke symbol that they might have thrown out there. Um, what did you think of the strategy of picking him first before Neal?
So to me, the way I look at it is there were 2 risks here. They could take their choice of tackles, any of the tackles, at 5, and assume that Tibbs is probably going to move past 6 to 7 because the Panthers desperately need like 3 offensive linemen. That O-line stinks.
Right.
The problem is you have to worry that someone's going to trade up to 6 because the Panthers, like I said, they desperately need offensive linemen. They need players. They will trade down and acquire picks. So what he did is he he ensured that no one would trade up to get Kayvon Thibodeaux. They took him. You know what I mean? He's off the board. And they were guaranteed to get one of their tackles. But what they lost in that scenario was the ability to trade down, in my opinion, from 7. That got vanquished the moment he took Thibodeaux first, because there's no way that Neal, Aquanu, and Cross are all going to be there. And then there's a massive drop-off in tackle talent. And it just becomes, do you really risk taking the 4th best tackle in a class where the tackles aren't really that good? So I think he took the safe bet. It absolutely was in my heart to get a first-round pick for next year. But he also said that he got calls from 3 different teams for the pick at 7, and we'll get into the pick at 7 next. But he got 3 different calls for the pick at 7 and didn't take them, partially because I don't think he could take them. But also, from the trades that we saw last night, and there were like a million, not one of them was for a quarterback, and not one of them involved picks for next year, first-round picks for next year. None of them. So if that wasn't on the table, then I'm okay. Take the tackle by all means, Evan Neal. So it turned out, I think, for the best.
I think it's actually a bigger thing than that. I completely agree with you 100% about the opportunities may not have presented themselves to make the pick for the future, just the way that things kind of flowed this year. But to me, this is something I think is very important, Giant fans. If they don't want to believe it, they don't want to accept it, this is a fact, and they proved it last night. This front office is committed to seeing what they have in Daniel Jones. They are not thinking yet, well, when he fails next year, we're going to put ourselves in position to get another quarterback. They are working under the working model that they are evaluating, and they think he might succeed. They decided to fortify this team this year, make this team better right now with the assets that they have. So next year, you'll get a better opportunity to evaluate Daniel Jones. You'll have a better right tackle for him, and we'll see how it plays out in the rest of the draft. But they are not giving lip service to, well, we're going to see what we have in him and make our decision. They didn't commit to Daniel Jones because they're not picking up the 5th-year option, but they are committed to that full evaluation period. And you know something? If it doesn't work out with him and they need to move on, they can make that deal next year if they have to. And they'll be in a little more position of strength because you're not going to be gutting, there'll be pieces on this roster from this year's draft. They'll make this team better so they can withstand if they have to trade, the 2024 first round pick, for example, to move up to get the quarterback and everything. So time will tell if that was the right move or not, but I definitely think this was a decision they made that, when they said something about that, unlike some of the pre-draft posturing and things they said, believe them when they said they are going to go through the Daniel Jones experiment and see what happens.
So I don't want to get into this totally yet, but is there a possibility that they are not fully committed to Daniel Jones and that they take Malik Willis at 36?
Possible. But now
do you think is it 10% or less, or is it more?
I think it's less. I think if they are still not sure about Daniel Jones, I very seriously doubt they would draft a guy who there is a lot of questions about. A lot of upside potential, but a lot of questions also. I think if they're going to move on from Daniel Jones, they want to minimize the risk as much as possible, and they will go big game hunting next year. And there are still, even though we had a great day one, there are a million holes on this team that need to be filled now. There are depth things on almost every position on this team that need to be filled now. They need to fortify this roster now and then, make that stretch. And then also, if you're going to fully evaluate Daniel Jones this year, is it really wise having that quarterback on the roster where, there's going to be a lot of noise, outside the building and potentially inside the building with another quarterback like that? I think if you're making the commitment to be uncommitted on Daniel Jones, be all in and sink or swim with him next year.
Yeah, I just can't see it happening. I don't like Malik Willis. I think the mechanics are just – it's such a huge project. This team is just not in a position to take on projects right now. This is
100%
this is a family wishing they could buy a boat when they can't afford groceries. You know what I mean? I guess it's possible. You know, Matt Corral is also still sitting around there. I don't know what they think of him or anybody else for that matter. But yeah, okay. So I agree with you, and
Yeah.
they are building the trenches. At pick 7, they picked Evan Neal. For the record, I'm going to go through my top 3 on my big board. So the Giants picked at 5 and 7. My top 3 on my big board. Do you know what they were? They were Aiden Hutchinson, Evan Neal, Kayvon Thibodeaux. So they got my second best player at 7 and my third best player at 5. That's pretty incredible. Evan Neal is a freak of nature. He is 6'7" and 350 pounds. And on top of that, he's wildly athletic. You finally now have someone who could probably fill in at left tackle if needed, if Andrew Thomas gets hurt, and not embarrass himself over there, playing at right tackle, where he should be locked down. I mean, he is a very good tackle. He's very athletic. You can do lots of things with him. Run game stuff could use a little bit of work. And don't get me, he's not a perfectly clean tackle. You know what I mean? There's things that can be worked on. But this is a plug-and-play starter at right tackle. And they've needed that since, I don't know, when did the Cold War end?
Apparently it hasn't.
Well, good point.
Yeah.
All right, so what was your reaction to Evan Neal at 7? I mean, they had Charles Aquanu was off the board at 6. So they had their choice of Charles Cross and Evan Neal, or trading down or anything else. I mean, I'm pretty sure, I don't remember my exact reaction. I believe I was fist pumping because Evan Neal is my OT1.
Evan Neal was my player 1 in this by big board.
There you go.
So I just, as soon as picks 1, 2, 3 started falling, I'm like, there's a really good chance we're going to get this guy. With Houston taking Stingley, that really set the option up. I am beyond thrilled. One thing I want to ask you, and it's a question we can partially answer now. We're still going to have to wait for the answer. Does this change at all your perception of the trade from last year? Because the Evan Neal pick is the Chicago Bears.
That's the Bears pick.
Right.
No. So this is I was walking to Penn Station from the studio last night with Danny King, and we were talking about how excited we were because it was like this weird lull, right? Like Giants picked very early in the night, and we were really excited, and then we're just kind of watching the draft together.
Right.
We left, and then we just kind of sitting there and remembered that the Giants got 2 studs. And then we started talking about it versus last year, and I was like, I was really excited last year, but it was more for the trade than obtaining Kadarius Toney. So I had this weird anticipatory excitement. Like we had a good day 1 last year, but half of it, not even half of it, almost 3/4 of the excitement of it was a carryover into this year. So we're finally seeing that. So it doesn't change my perception. This is actually this is the finishing touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we thought that pick was so important that we were going to go to Chicago to watch 2 of the worst teams in the league play in January.
Almost.
Yeah,
it almost happened.
That's what we thought when we first made the plans to make the trip. That was what our thought was.
Well, we were going to go anyway. There was a snowstorm.
That's exactly right.
We were very close to going anyway.
But when we were making our plans back in, the fall and stuff, it's like we thought the Giants would be better than they were. And we're like, this game is doubly important. This might be for a potential playoff spot for us, and also to ensure that our draft pick will be better and better. Mm-hmm. Are you more excited about Thibodeaux, or are you more excited about Neal?
I'm more excited about Neal. It's not particularly close. Don't get me wrong. I'm thrilled to have Thibodeaux. I'm thrilled to have the edge presence. But we did our depth chart thing the last episode, I think, and I had everything broken down into musts, needs, and strongly consider and all that stuff. And to me, edge is a need. It was a strong need, probably the strongest need, but it wasn't a absolute must in this draft. The only drop to the must was a compelling argument made by you in that we're not picking up here very often. We don't want to be picking up here anymore. We're here now. There's a guy that's going to be there. We should take him. And that's a very compelling argument. But just from a roster standpoint, I didn't see the strong need for an edge rusher the same way I saw it at corner with James Bradbury likely gone. Safety where we don't have any depth and Julian Love probably shouldn't be starting. And most of all, right tackle where Matt Gano cannot be a starter. Can't be a starter. So I am more excited about Evan Neal because that was the number one must. And edge was only a number one need. But I'm thrilled. I mean, having Azeez Ojulari had a fantastic rookie year, far better than I actually expected from him. He's crazy young. He has a lot of development to go through, but he has the tools to work with. And he had basically no pass rush supporting cast. So I expected very little from him last year. And he still managed to have a really, really solid year for a rookie. Now he gets to play. He's bulked up. If you saw that picture of him, he looks ridiculously jacked.
Mm-hmm. He doesn't have to be the man either anymore.
And he doesn't have to be the man anymore, man. And you know, this is a new system that prioritizes pressure, which will make things easier. He's going to see a lot more one-on-ones. And he might be setting up other people to get sacks as well. So maybe his numbers, his production won't be there. But this is an overall great thing for this defense. And if they can pair them up with a solid corner to really lock down the outside with Adoree Jackson and then this guy and then have two pass rushers, they're already better than they were last year. And they were pretty good last year. The defense was not bad last year.
And let's remind Giant fans one thing, and I didn't have to say this, but it does bear reminding. The rebuild of the Giants doesn't take 1 year. This is year one of the rebuild. You know, now next year they can supplement via free agency, via the draft, via trades, via, you know, free agent pickups or whatever, you know, cut down guys. This roster will get better and better. So now you don't have to go for the home run for every little pick next year because now you're getting your cornerstone foundational pieces on both sides of the ball. So I really couldn't have been any more happier the way this draft panned out. I really can't so far.
You know, for all the talk of hog mollies, it finally feels like we're actually addressing the trenches.
Well, that was my other key point I have written over here. It's like it's no more talk. We're actually doing something we said we've been doing for a generation.
Yeah, the supposed identity of this franchise.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what to say. I was just so excited last night, and I was in a car, so I can't really tweet, and I'm driving home from Secaucus, and I was just like, trench warfare. It feels like trench warfare. We're finally building up that middle. I want to dominate on both sides of the line. That being said, well, go ahead.
Once we get, you know, past the draft and everything, I'm very, very excited to start doing our position breakdowns post-draft because I'm very interested in what your analysis is going to be of this offensive line right now. I mean, again, there may be another piece or two added in the draft. We don't know, but it definitely changes, you know, the dynamic of what this line's going to be from a bunch of guys that are stopgap guys who we picked up before the draft that are now become depth pieces.
There is still work that needs to be done on the offensive line.
Oh, it's not done. It's not done.
But so who's still missing? We have 3 picks today in 2 rounds, 1 second and 2 thirds. What do the Giants still need here? What do they need to get here specifically? Well, actually, what do they need to come away from the draft with? They've already nailed a must and a need for me. The way I look at it, I'm gonna give you my quick bullet points. I'm not gonna get into too much detail here, but I think the number one thing here is they still need a corner. I am not banking on James Bradbury being here, so that's number one. Okay, mm-hmm. I would say the next 4 are all really tight for me. I think they still need a safety.
That's my number 2.
I don't like the idea of Julian Love being the starter, and I hate the idea that there's no depth there. And I don't want to fill the depth up with just a shitload of UDFAs. That's not going to cut it for me.
No.
The Giants still need a tight end. They've addressed it a little bit with Seals, Jones, and Atkins, but those guys should not be the first 2 guys in the lineup.
That's my number 4.
Okay. That one I have maybe only slightly ahead of this one because of the way the draft pieces kind of fall, but the Giants desperately need interior offensive linemen. They now have a playable roster on the offensive line, but there's a lot of uncertainty at center and left guard, and they should be thinking about the right guard of the future behind Glowinski as well. So all three interior positions, I think, can be addressed.
I feel that's a big need, but again, as we start dipping down into the third, fourth, fifth round, are we really going to get the guy that's going to be the adequate piece we need there?
I think so. At guard and center, yes, I do think so. Those are your middle round guys that can be starters. We see it all the time with the those center is more difficult, but guard, those guys, they come from all parts of the draft. There's obviously the Quentin Nelsons of the world, but they are so rare. And Kenyon Green and Zion Johnson, those guys are so rare that go in the first round. A lot of day two guys are absolute starters in this league, just not Will Hernandez. I also have.
Well, he was on the path.
Yeah. The Giants still desperately need inside linebacker. Blake Martinez post ACL is not ideal. It's also the last year of his deal, I believe. And Tay Crowder, that's less than ideal there. And it's a big part of. They need a captain there. Blake Martinez coming here.
Tay Crowder was a Mr. Irrelevant.
It's true. Yeah.
So I mean, for a Mr. Irrelevant really to make a roster is a pretty good achievement. It's a story when that does happen.
It's true.
And the fact that we're kind of relying on him, third year in, that tells me we need to have a talent upgrade.
That's what I have right now. Those are what I think they absolutely need to come away from. Everything else would be gravy, but obviously they need help everywhere.
I think they need a wide receiver still.
Okay. I
feel like, there's names on paper, but, until, and I've been defending the guy from day one, but until, UC Kadarius Toney lined up on the first offensive snap of the season, healthy and ready to go, there's still going to be some question marks. Everybody else, there's injury concerns. The last couple of years, we've had to go through the season and pick up guys off the street to be wide receivers, and I don't feel that much more comforted in what we have right now. We have a bunch of guys that we brought back, but there's still, the Sterling Shepherds, but there's questions.
Now, where do you place that need? Like, where do they need to address it? Do you place that as a priority where they need to get a guy that's going to be rock solid for this team, like a day two guy, round 2, round 3, maybe round 4, where you're looking at long term, he's going to be here for a couple of years? Or are you getting somebody that's just like, can you wait until round 5 and 6 and just get somebody that, like, maybe they'll develop, maybe they won't, but they'll absolutely help this year at least?
I'm kind of feeling I'm a little more towards the former. I kind of feel like it's, we still have question marks at tight end. We don't know what's happening there. And again, if we're trying to put Daniel Jones in the best possible position to succeed, I want him to have some more weapons than we do now, more ones he can count on. So in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't seem logical that wide receiver is that important. But in this unique situation that they're in right now, in this phase of this evaluation of Daniel Jones, in this part of it, I think I would maybe accelerate the need for a wide receiver a little more than I would normally, in other different circumstances.
Yeah, I guess I didn't really consider that Kadarius Toney is like just barely ever on the field. Kenny Golladay has injury concerns where he's not on the field all that often. Sterling Shepard is coming off of an injury. Darius Slayton is always injured and also not that consistent. What I was going to say is, like, you can kind of get the tight end and fill 2 roles here, right? Like, you get a pass catcher that helps out the wide receiver group a little bit to move the chains in that kind of regard, but also to help with the blocking, and tight end is just a need in general. It can kind of cover up that wide receiver thing, you know what I'm saying? But now that I think about it, like, you're right. There's not one reliable wide receiver on this roster. They all have injury concerns at the very least, in addition to talent concerns beyond that.
Yeah, and even a guy like Kenny Golladay, you saw how frustrated early in the season he was last year. It's like, you don't know if he's going to be another year of frustration, what kind of, if he turns into a head case or not. I mean, he also didn't have a touchdown catch last year. He wasn't good.
Yeah.
I mean, you can only pin so much on the offense and the quarterback and the offensive line and the tight ends and the scheme.
I'll say this: he didn't excel beyond the scheme. He didn't rise above it. But I mean, it was very hard for him to do that. He's
understandable.
Yeah.
But for the amount of money we paid for him at the time we paid for him, I need him to, you know, outkick his coverage a little bit, and he was certainly a fair catch.
Sure. Yeah. You know what? Now that I'm thinking more and more about, see, the thing is, I think they need a starter at tight end, in my opinion, and the problem is, I know that like guys like Jake Ferguson in mock drafts and stuff are all the way at 5, and Daniel Jeremiah doesn't round 5. I mean, and Daniel Jeremiah and like all these, I don't know, I just picked the name, but these mock draft people that do this for like a living, they have guys like that really really low on their boards. I just don't think that teams view them in that way. The film is too good on these guys to be so late in the draft. I just don't think it's going to fall that way. I could be absolutely wrong. So I'm
that's what
worried.
we'll find out.
Yeah.
You know, again, this is still the first year of this administration, and we're still trying to learn what their preferences are, what they're looking for in a guy, you know, what their evaluation consists of. I mean, we're all kind of in the dark a little bit, you know, not only us as fans, but media members, other teams. They're still trying to figure it out too. I mean, if we're in year 4 of this, I think we can probably say something like, well, you know, this tight end fits what we are looking for and what we're trying to do. He might mock higher than, you know, where he's being projected. But I think it's tough to tell right now.
All right, so closing thoughts. How are we feeling about day 2 here?
I mean, having a great day 1 makes you feel better about day 2. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the things you saw, the way I think they kind of outfoxed people to get the guys they wanted, I think they got a little luck and somehow some guys fell. Now it's just, let's see how their big board matches up with, you know, other teams and getting the guys that they want. So my confidence in this crew has gone up since yesterday. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's really all you can do right now. Now we just kind of sit back, we get our popcorn, and we watch and see who we get.
Absolutely. And I will be eating popcorn live on YouTube on the Talking Giants channel again tonight.
You're on again?
I'm on again tonight. This is my last night doing it. Saturday I will be off and relaxing and just checking Twitter.
Nice. I will be at Lightning Islanders, but I will be much more plugged in, and I will be commentating as I can on Twitter as things are going on. So,
so be sure to check that out as well. And then we're going to have some episode next week where we kind of react to the entire draft, break things down. And then we have some exciting stuff coming up that we're getting some other guys on the show, and we'll have a nice big post-draft talk, and I am excited for that.
I'm very excited about that.
So be sure to follow this show on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever. And follow me on Twitter at football_grump and at the Cranky Fan, and the show is at Just Giants Pod.
And make sure to watch the Talking Giants feed where Grump will do another great job like he did last night. It was really good.
Yeah. Bobby and Justin run a very tight ship. They have things very organized, and it was nice and easy. And also, that studio is beautiful. So be sure to check them out as well if you don't already. And if you're watching NFL Network or ESPN, you are losing. The better way to do it is to watch us.
Oh, you don't like Mike Greenberg with his white bread vanilla toast saying nothing?
Vanilla toast. I don't like any of it, to be honest with you. But, you know, like we were complaining the whole night. The feed was behind. Whatever.
I want to know what color hair Mel Kiper Jr.'s hair is now.
We were watching the NFL Network one last night.
Yeah, it's some sort of weird chestnutty. I don't know. That was one of the big draft questions I had, was what color hair he has.
Well, you know it's a good draft when you're more worried about that than anything else.
Exactly.
All right, guys. We will catch you next time. Go Giants.
Go Giants.